Back to the lost and found, man. I'm here with a super special guy to me. I'll let him introduce himself, but this man, always believed in me even when I didn't. This is going to be a good episode. I hope you guys hold on, So I'll let Chris introduce himself and we'll get to talking about our topic.
Hi, my name is Chris Troop. I work in a residential treatment center. I have a fairly long-term sobriety, 17 years. And I had a massive relapse after the first 10, and then I've been sober now this time, 17 years. I started off with alcohol, and it led me to heroin, ultimately, is what I finished with. It finished me almost.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes, right? Alcohol to the hard stuff.
Certainly a gateway kind of thing for me anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
Part of what I do is I teach 12-step type recovery at my work, and I have sort of an extensive knowledge of kind of like word for word of what the intent and the meaning is behind step work and fellowship and some kind of kooky spirituality.
Right.
Not religion.
Yeah, but we will definitely dive into that in an episode. That'll be a whole damn day.
So our idea here, John, I think is to explain where we were,
right,
how we got to where we are today, kind of like what it is now, and then we'll have some episodes that talk about steps and the actual process. So
yes.
I think today we're going to cover sort of the general
outline why we came in.
Yeah, and what's sort of wrong with us, or not wrong with us, but what makes us different from the other 90% of the population. But there are approximately 30 to 35 million people that either need recovery or have been in recovery. And I was one of them. I didn't want any part of the 12-stepping lifestyle and people telling me what to do. But if I was going to bet on people that are in recovery, I'd pick the ones where the biggest numbers are, and the biggest numbers have been in 12-step programs.
Right. And we know that program's successful more than anything,
For millions.
Yeah, exactly.
Millions.
For the book being around that long, and it could be billions at this point.
Yeah.
That book's been around so damn long.
90 plus years.
Yeah. And it's made to study, man. You sure got that book down. I can tell you that.
We can talk about that as well, the history sort of where it all started.
Yeah, that was cool. When I was in treatment, you showed me a video of
the black and white video.
Yeah,
those guys that are just early pioneers.
Bill, and you showed me the Bill story online or on the video. It was cool. I told you should show everybody. That was a cool video.
Unfortunately, we just our time is so critical there.
I know, you don't have enough people. We'll talk about treatment facilities one day too.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Definitely.
I'm not an expert in that, but I do work in one.
Right. And I get up there a lot, and a lot of other treatments, and I've seen some sinners, that's for sure.
And honestly, John, I think you and I in the program have really helped a bunch of people, and a bunch of men, and maybe some women too, and what a blessing that's been for us.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I just try to get them to you for that time, and I'm like, just go get your knowledge, dude. Put your ego aside. He just wants all you guys to get it, and he knows you're not. You know what I mean?
And so why do we need the knowledge? Well, we need the knowledge because we need to be able to sort of diagnose the problem first. So we have to kind of understand what's going on.
Right, and I think, like you said, identifying, like I think I knew I was an addict down deep. I had so many people looking up to me. It was so hard to ask a hand out. I gave my hand out, but I don't help myself. You know what I mean?
Honestly, we've made so many empty promises to the people that loved us when we couldn't love ourselves, right? I remember to my wife swearing, today's the last day, I promise. I promise this time I'm really serious.
Yeah.
And inevitably by the next day I was back right to it. And it's not because we're bad people, John. It's just that we're wired a little differently than a lot of the people around us.
Yeah, and I agree. I didn't feel like anybody was living like me.
Right.
Because I was just trying to off myself at the end anyway.
Yeah. I remember when I checked into rehab, the lady had given me an assessment test of where I was at and I'll talk about that in the future, but she had told me there's good news and there's bad news, and the good news is that there's hope, and the bad news is that we're it, right?
And they are. That's the most truthful thing. Like, I came in so hostile, and at the end, I was just like, that circle of people, like, saved my life.
Right.
You know, that was back when Lisette and Vanessa, and like, man, I just remember wanting to leave every day, and they're just like, you can't go home, you know?
We resist it. We resist recovery for some reason so vehemently,
Right.
With so much energy. If we can learn to capture that energy or take that energy into this recovery thing, we got a fighting chance.
Right.
The whole idea here is to escape the pain and suffering that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know about you. All I do know about you. But I used with the intention of overdosing every day.
Right.
My wife once said to me, "Aren't you worried about a fatal overdose?" You know, and when I was honest with myself, I realized I was worried about the fatal underdose.
Yeah.
I was worried about not having enough.
Uh-huh.
There was never enough.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky that I never had to experience fentanyl. Experienced it getting a colonoscopy or something.
Yeah.
But honestly, that street drug would have killed me.
I just don't see a lot of people coming back from fentanyl anymore. Like, it's just, it's difficult. And they're doing other things on top of that. It makes it even harder to quit. You're taking that trank dope or that benzo dope. Now you're on benzos and fentanyl.
Yeah, I took a client in the other day. We admitted a guy who was a chronic meth user, and he was smoking. I asked him, part of our intake process is, well, how much are you using a day?
Yeah.
He said to me, as much as I can get, and I could so relate to that.
Right.
When we gave him a urine test, he tested positive for meth and fentanyl, and he said, I've never done fentanyl in my life. And so it means that they're cutting that stuff.
What happens is you're not that dope sick, isn't that dope sick anymore. It's the fentanyl sick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now you're like, they do meth and fentanyl now because it gives them that easy, you know.
Sure, yeah.
I would do Xanax and fentanyl, so
Sure, yeah,
balance. Yeah.
Benzos.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of this thinking is that I can think my way out of this, that I have what it takes to shift course. And I was talking about this last night at a meeting where I felt like a train pulling into a train yard, and there's like 15 or 20 different sets of tracks, and the guy gets out there and he pulls a lever and the train shifts tracks, right? And that's kind of what recovery is about. The recovery is about letting us pull that switch and just finding another perspective, kind of a different way of viewing things. And hopefully we can talk about that as well. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot going on, but the basic thing, especially if you're just starting out or you're just desperate to get started, or you feel this sense of desperation that drugs and alcohol can take us to that dark place, that there's a way out of this.
Right.
Like, I didn't want to have people tell me how to think. I didn't want to be ordered around. But it turns out that that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
I needed somebody to say, well, look at it this way. Your way of thinking is so dark and contaminated. There's another way. And we pull that lever on the train track and we can get into...
That's a good analogy because, like you said, you're trying to find some new crossroads. And
I knew that something had to change, right?
Right.
I just wanted it to be you. I didn't want it to be me.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted everything else to change so life would be easier for me. And part of the mindset of the addict and the alcoholic is that, hey, you know, I shouldn't have to feel this way.
Right.
I don't care how you feel. But
I shouldn't have
to feel this way.
Yeah,
right?
selfish.
And right now, when I'm dope sick or when I'm craving or when I'm tired or anxious, right? And we can talk about all that that sort of ritual that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I call that automatic life.
Yeah.
Just doing the same shit every
Over
single
and over
day.
and over
Take
again.
care of your kid, do some dope, sleep, work, come home, eat dinner, take care of the kid, and you get into that nasty cycle.
And the whole time we're lying to ourselves, right? Like, we're lying to ourselves, I got this.
Yeah.
I remember thinking to myself, I got this. You know, I hit a guy over the head with a brick once, an older man. I came up behind him. I was homeless and desperate to get money, and I hit him in the head, and I heard him I'm sure really bad. And like, how do I get okay with that? How do I justify that kind of thinking in my head? And what I have to do is lie to myself, right? And I've lied to myself so many times that I just start believing the shit I'm telling myself.
Right.
Hopefully part of this is this unpacking of that contaminated mindset that justifies another relapse or justifies another use. Or, you know, like I swore to myself this morning I wasn't going to drink and use, but now I find myself hammered
drinking and using. And again, that's the definition is, you know, drinking against your will.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And we can also talk about the multiple sort of different cycles of addiction and how to get out of them. You know, early on, we think we can think our way out, right? Like, I got this. We just talked about it. I can think my way out of this. The bottom line is if my broken brain got me into the trouble that I'm in, I can't use that same broken brain to
get yourself out.
Right.
Yeah.
And the delusion is that we tell ourselves that we can't. And it's just not possible.
Right.
I mean, I found, and I'm sure you found, that without help, it's just too damn big. I mean, the monster's too big.
And you can't do it. You just can't do it alone. You try it alone, you're gonna fail. That's just my opinion and how I've seen it.
Well, we've proven to ourselves countless times, over and over, right?
Every day.
Every day. And
I'm gonna taper down.
And we have this little glimmer of hope that drugs may give us that today's going to be different.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
And it never is.
Today's just worse.
Yeah, it always gets worse.
Yeah.
And if you're finding yourself in that place, I remember once, John, I stole a can of paint off of a dock. It was a yellow can of paint, and I sort of lived by this liquor store, and I went in and talked to the manager, and I said, look, can I paint the yellow lines in the parking lot for you in exchange for a pint of vodka and a pack of cigarettes? And he said yes, and I remember being out there literally on my hands and knees painting those lines, and people would look, at least I felt that they were looking down their nose at me thinking, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
What's wrong with this guy? And the bottom line, I didn't know what was wrong. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't have a clue what it was. And then I remember that following Thanksgiving not having any place to go. So my plug invited me over to her house and to have some food, which I couldn't eat because I was so spun.
Yeah.
But I begged her to let me clean the floor of her kitchen after she was done cooking she'd give me a quarter. Just something to put in the pipe.
The things we do are just...
Right, so it always gets worse.
Yeah, I tell them guys, man, smile, it gets worse, buddy. Even when you come out. Life is still life, and life isn't happening at you. Life is just happening.
Yeah.
And how we react to that life is how we make that change, the inner change, You can change the outside, we can act like it, but you're still carrying all the baggage from things like you said. How you get over some fentanyl through your whole city, I don't know where that shit went, Even the guys that had gotten shot over there, I pray for them, man. It was never my doing, and I just feel like they thought that it was me, and that still makes me feel bad, you know what I mean? Because one thing I'm not is I'm not a killer,
So let's talk about some of the cycles at some point and how farther out we get in these crazy cycles, the harder they become to break.
Right.
And really that'll come sort of when we start talking about first the step one.
Yeah, and that'll be cool. This is what we're doing, guys. We're kind of giving you the rundown at first of basically why we came in, how powerless we got, and a little bit about the program. Like Chris says, you got to have a team, and if you guys need help, we have our link in the bio. That is what we are here for. So if you need help, maybe even a temporary sponsor, or you need in another state some help,
or even some ideas on how to get into treatment. But
we can help is what we're saying.
If you see your future kind of running out, or I remember trying to think, what's my future look like? And it was actually on the airplane on the way out to Phoenix for me to check into treatment, and I couldn't picture anything. I couldn't even imagine a future for myself, right? When I sort of closed my eyes to think about that, all I saw was just darkness, right? Like just darkness. And I remember my first week there, a bunch of guys came in from the local meeting and shared their hope with us and how they had gotten sober. And I remember feeling like the first time that there was a little bit of light starting to creep in, right? Like just a little bit. And I had gone for so many years without seeing any light at all.
Right.
You know, that's the good news, is there's a way out of this.
Yeah, man, that little light he's talking about is all you need, man, and some support to see that light. And that thing grows and grows and grows and grows as long as you're living the right way.
Traveled to Southeast Asia on a vacation. I spent a month in Thailand and Vietnam.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, on a food journey. And I remember when I first got there, my first weekend, I went to an AA convention in a place called Phuket. That there was a bunch of English-speaking people, and I thought,
really?
what a blessing in this 90 years that recovery's been around. You can go to any city, any big city in the world, and a lot of small ones, and find recovery, find some hope. I made a point of going into meetings in every city that I was in.
That's sick.
And then even in Vietnam and Saigon, there was an English-speaking meeting. Yeah,
wow.
It was crazy.
I missed that. I should have went on that damn trip.
Yeah, it was a fun trip. But really it comes down to this experience of feeling hope for the first time. And John and I are hoping that through our chats that we can kind of share some of that with the audience.
Definitely.
I didn't know it was available.
Yeah.
I really felt like I was the only one in this dark place. We want to let you know that there's a chance if you want to experience some of the hope and the joy that we felt.
Right. And we'll get into some stories later, how it was and like what it took for us to get in there, and some of the stories of why we were, you could tell that we were mentally ill just by the actions of what we were doing, you know.
Like I remember telling myself that I was a good parent, you know, I was a good dad, a provider, and really the evidence says that otherwise.
Right.
You know, I had put my kids in the back of a car and in like a $500 Hyundai at that time, and that had cigarette butts all over the carpet, and I put them in the back seat without seatbelts, and I drove them, I think at like 2 o'clock in the morning underneath a bridge in San Diego looking for dope. And the whole time I told myself I was being a good father, that I loved them.
Just gonna ask, what were you telling yourself?
Yeah, I'm telling myself there's nothing to see here, right? Like everything's okay.
I'm gonna get my dope. And
I'm like the only white guy in 10 square miles of this area that I was in. I mean, it comes down to selfish and self-centered, what I'm using.
Yeah.
All I think about is myself. I tell myself the bullshit that's not true.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, some of us say, oh, I'm still functioning, I'm paying my bills.
And they call it all kinds of
right.
functioning alcoholic.
But the bottom line is that we're sort of worshiping or
oh my gosh,
relying on something that's...
Telling the story where you drove fucking 900 miles.
I drove to San Francisco once from San Diego to buy some dope. I'm going to talk about going to any land.
Right. It might take me 3 days and I'm going.
That was like a 12-hour trip.
Yeah. And you probably turned around and came home.
Yeah, high as hell.
Yeah.
Drove drunk.
Trophy,
Yeah. We want to encourage you to try something new and to ask for help. I mean, that's where it all started.
Right.
For us, I think, for me anyway.
Definitely.
We just, without help, it's just too damn big of an enemy.
You just can't see the end, you know?
Yeah.
If you don't have the knowledge of there can be a better end, you know?
Yeah, there's another way.
Right.
And sometimes we just need somebody to shine the light on the other way.
Yeah.
And so the great thing about recovery is that it gives us a new perspective.
Right.
Like, I had always seen things so dark and negatively.
Right.
And in recovery, people, sponsors, you know, my friends, people that had gone before me said, hey, you know, you may be thinking bad.
Right.
And look, this is another way of thinking, and that's part of the way what the steps are there to help us with. But
Yeah.
certainly the fellowship, and I tell my guys a lot of like, if I'm going to hang out with people all day long that are trying to get loaded, then the probability is I'm going to get loaded too. I didn't want this to be the answer. I really didn't. I thought everybody in AA was losers.
Right.
In AA, right, losers. And what I found was completely surprising. I never imagined that being supported by a brother or sister and family and
That shit's an amazing feeling.
so if I'm hanging out with people that are trying to stay clean all day, then chances are I'm going to stay clean.
Yep.
Or hopefully we'll help expose some of the ways that we think in a contaminated way and offer some solutions and different ways of viewing things. I know that for me, I remember I had traded that $500 car, gave that car to my plug, and I told her that my mom had a heart attack and I needed to go to Arizona, and I was really going for treatment. And I was thinking to myself, this is the worst day of my life. And now looking back, I realized that it was actually the best day of my life.
I remember.
Like it was the beginning of something more.
I remember telling you that leaving treatment, this is the worst thing that ever happened in my life. And you were like, this is the best thing that ever happened in your life. Because there is no life if I would have stayed.
There's no life. And why do we do it? We do it because it's the next right thing to do.
Right.
And we've done the wrong things for so long. We got to figure out a new way.